All right, Lisa, thanks so much for being on this podcast. My first question that I have for you is, tell the audience just a little bit about your background and how you started in what you do today and the podcast and all that.
Yeah, so my background is as a psychotherapist, and just working therapeutically with people for a very long time. Even before I was licensed, I was doing community-based therapy. So, working mostly with youth in juvenile halls and doing some work here in Oakland with commercial sexual exploitation. At a certain point, I decided to open up my own office here in Oakland. So, I've been enjoying doing that for almost 15 years now. And also have just come to know so many amazing people through this work in trauma and dissociation in particular. I find people really want to help and are also humbled and open to learning. And I think those are two helpful qualities in life and in this work. And so, having met so many amazing researchers and clinicians and people who've been through really gnarly things in life, like the most unspeakable horrors, honestly, and all kinds of layers of trauma and challenge, and still seeing that light in them that makes its way through. I started the podcast, How We Can Heal podcast, in 2022, just interviewing people about healing, really any angle on healing. How'd you make it through? What are you researching? What's helping? Let's just talk about it, get that information out there in a casual and accessible way. And yeah, hopefully just keep these healing conversations going. So I love that you have this podcast, and thanks for inviting me on, Laszlo.
Let's get into the mental health side of it first, because, what sorts of modalities do you use?
So in my practice, I'm big on yoga. I've always been someone who wants to be really embodied or athletic, even. I've been a yoga teacher since 2000, so 25 years now, and used to teach yoga in those settings. Like I was doing dance and yoga with youth in housing development in LA, and then in juvenile halls, and then in schools when kids left juvenile halls, and always been like that, the yoga lady, you call me. So yoga is a big modality for me. I have, you could probably maybe see behind me, my mat rolled out in the office right
Yes.
now. I do yoga with people and different types of yoga, not just like a regular yoga class, but there's even someone I was working with earlier today. We were practicing pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. Sometimes with trauma, people get overstimulated really easily. And so that can come in handy. There's so many tools in yoga, and it's about finding the match, the right time, the right thing that feels supportive. So, yoga, anything that's somatic or embodied, I've studied, I've used, explored, and will just kind of mix in with some of this work. And also, so somatic experiencing, lots of different somatic approaches, and EMDR, neurofeedback. I mean, anything that looks like it's helping folks who have experienced trauma, I'll dip a toe in, or I'll dive all the way in, and then take what I can and apply that to folks that I'm working with. So most recently, deep brain reorienting has been really interesting and helpful for a lot of clients across the board with post-traumatic stress, even dissociative identity disorders or presentations. So that's been really interesting. So I use a lot of tools. I always try to keep it real because we know the relationship is the foundation of healing. Like we've so much research, and there's a lot of evidence-based practices out there, but the most evidence-based practice is the relationship, right? We have meta-analyses looking across different modalities. If there's a good relationship there, the therapy tends to be more successful, more helpful, more of a positive experience for the client. And so, yeah, I try to just keep it real, work on myself, support myself, and yeah, keep growing as I'm
hmm
doing.
Yeah, when I heard you say yoga, I could relate because I love yoga too. So it's really sort of it's really good. I remember doing a group yoga class with a bunch of people in the Seattle waterfront. I'm in Seattle, by the way. And so I
Yes.
was doing it with all sorts of people. And then one woman came up to me. She said, "Are you doing this?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I can't catch up." Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah. That's so cool. It's beautiful up there. I got to live in Seattle for a summer by Green Lake. And so, yeah, doing yoga on the waterfront, that's amazing. How could you not, right? You
Y-
see people doing it, you're like, here I come.
Yeah, I think I also saw one of you post some of your yoga videos or yoga tutorials, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken.
Yeah, yeah, I have some of those online. I haven't done one in a while, but yeah, I've had some of those. When people ask a certain question, I'll just respond with a video and put it out there because there's a lot of, just like a lot, many fields, I'm sure, are like this. You learn it and you're like, why doesn't everyone know this? Like everyone needs to know this. So it's great we have YouTube, other avenues to just spread the love.
And tell me a little bit about deep brain or reorienting. What's that all about?
So deep brain reorienting is a modality that's really becoming popular in the trauma world. As I see it, I see more and more clinicians being going through training and incorporating it. It's based on, rather than sort of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of the nervous system responses that we've studied so much in trauma, it's going more for shock, like pre-effective shock, meaning before there's emotion, before there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, before that happens, our body orients to a threat and has a shock response. Often that shock response is more subtle than the bigger things that follow, so we don't pay as much attention to it. But in terms of brain structures, it's happening, deeper in the brain. It's happening earlier in the experience, those first few milliseconds even. So, Frank Corrigan is the founder. I've done training with him. I had him on my podcast too. Dr. Jessica Christie Sands co-wrote the book, and I believe Hannah Young, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't have it in front of me, wrote a wonderful book on deep brain reorienting. But clinically, I see it's a gentle and really body present moment focused modality. It's structured, so it's not going all over the place. It's looking for a very specific time, milliseconds, very specific sensations in areas of your face and head. And I've seen it be approachable for people and help people process, resolve, address traumatic memories without having to dive into all those really intense deep emotions. They might come up, they're connected to it for sure, but the focus isn't to go seeking that so much as to make space for the shock to process and to dissipate. So it's really interesting, and it's been fascinating for me to see how helpful it can be for people and how quickly things can shift, perspective can shift within a session by just staying with pretty straightforward sensations in the body.
Mm-hmm. And the podcast. So how did that get started and what was your motivation behind it?
It's funny. My partner, Alex, probably when we met 10 years ago, was like, you should do a podcast. And I'm someone who's, chronically busy, has a lot going on. So he'll send me podcasts all the time to listen to. And I never feel like I never finish them. So I'm like, oh, I'm not really a podcast person. There's so much information out there, I don't want to add to it. And so for years, he told me, Laszlo, for years, he was like, you should do a podcast. You should do a podcast. And I was like, la, 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 barely even like stayed in my brain. And then, of course, years later, I'm in a mentoring session with a few like business gurus, right? And Gabby Bernstein, who was the first guest on the podcast, was there. And she was like, I don't know why, Lisa, just intuitively, I feel like podcasts for you. I feel like you should do a podcast. And by that time, I had warmed up to it enough that I had a note in my phone and I had a list of people I might want to interview if I was ever going to do it. But I hadn't quite stepped in and said, I'm going to do it. So that was the moment she was like, I think you should do a podcast. And I was like, well, I have a note in my phone and your name's on the list. She said, let's do it. So she was the first person I interviewed, season 1 in 2022. And then Alex was like, I've been telling you all this time. And so sometimes, your partner sees something in you well before you're ready to see it. But it's been going strong now. We're wrapping up season 6, and I've really enjoyed it, getting to speak to just amazing clinicians and people all over the world and share their stories. It's been really fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were also guest on a podcast episode that I saw the other day. So my question for you is it better for you to be the host or is it better to be the guest? Because I was a guest on a podcast myself and it was so, kind of it was my first time. It was so kind of terrifying, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think I like both, honestly, because I just like talking with people. And so I feel like as the host, I feel this like sense of responsibility that I can put down as a guest. I'm like, here you go, you ask the questions. So thank you for having me on. I really enjoy it. And I feel like any conversation that could be healing or have a positive effect on someone, I'm down for. Whether it's a podcast, it's recorded, it's not recorded, like those are the conversations I want to be having. And so I feel like as a guest and as a host, it's a gift to just be able to shut out other noise for a chunk of time and just talk about things that to me are really important, like human connection and healing and all of that. So I love it all.
Who was your favorite guest from like season one to like season six that kind of stuck with you?
Oh, God, that's an impossible question. But the first thing that comes to mind is my mom. That's the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm going to go with it. All my guests are my favorite guests. I just recorded one with Katarina Hartmuth, who's amazing, ultra runner. I respect so much. Christine Forner's come back on the show. So many clinicians and researchers have been on more than once, even. But there's something really special about like recording a conversation with a member of your family,
Mhm.
like being able to, like when I go over and see my parents right now, I have a 2.5-year-old. She just runs around and it's just that's everything we talk about is just like, oh, is she okay? Did she fall? Oh, you need a diaper change. Oh, you need a snack. Like, so to again set everything aside and dedicate time for this deeper conversation is so valuable. So yeah, being able to do that with my own mom, and I feel like with any guest, I could just keep going and make a whole podcast with just them because there's so much richness in each person and their history. But there's something personal for me in that, right? It's my mama. So I get to like sit and things I've asked her and things I haven't had the chance to ask her. So that was a really special episode for sure.
What is it like sort of interviewing with your mother? Is it kind of unique or is it kind of different? Because when you interview your other guests, it's usually kind of different. In this case, it's your mom. It's somebody that you're close to.
I know her so well, right? So I think I have a different, this is like, I think about having clients for 10 years, right? In psychotherapy, people say, oh, you've been in therapy 10 years, aren't you done? It's like, no, now my therapist knows me so well. I don't have to explain things to them. They know how people in my life behave. They know what's going on. So a little bit of that, a lot of that with my mom of knowing how much wisdom and depth she has and wanting to share it with the audience. I definitely feel this like sense of responsibility because I feel like I see how amazing my guests are and I'm like I want to help get that out in this conversation, but I'm also try to be open and just let it flow and be what it is without having, too much agenda. But yeah, I think with my mom it was really special to we also share a very overlapping professional world, so to be able to share that together, to have an hour to talk about it with the intention of sharing it with other people, yeah, just really unique and special and definitely different from other guests. She's my mom, and she's a great mom, so it's I feel like
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had guests on that were kind of not as easygoing or not as but cannot open up very easily because I've had guests on my podcast that they're not as what's the word, approachable or that kind of thing because those people sometimes come up. So I'm wondering for you if that was the case, if you had a guest on that.
I feel like everyone's style is a little bit different. Similar to therapy, some people are very short and direct in their answers. So you have to learn to not ask like a yes or no question because you'll just get yes or you'll just get no and you won't get any more context, right?
Yeah.
And then I also same thing with therapy. Like some people you ask one question and like 45 minutes later, you're like, how did we get to where we are now? Like it just everything's happening so fast. So everyone's different. And I try to just work with and celebrate how people are. I don't, I don't feel like I've had guests that are, um, hard for me. Usually I invite people on who I already have a sense of, their expertise or what questions I can ask that they'll have a lot to say about. But I will say that everyone's different and every style is a little different. And each time I interview someone, like I said, I try to set expectations down, but I do have like a sense of responsibility to it. So in that, people surprise me sometimes with
Mhm.
what they do and don't say or the direction they'll take things. And that's where I try to just be open and let it be. I'll say because as I mentioned, I worked in juvenile halls for a long time. And so I've definitely had so many experiences in therapy of people being very terse, very short, very like not wanting to engage. And at least from a clinical perspective, like if I'm doing psychotherapy or I'm doing some kind of social work with them, I always found the best practice for me was just to be with them and like let them be that way. Like usually it was, you know, a teen who maybe just got out of juvenile hall and is having trouble with their family and like they don't trust me at all. We just met a month ago. Why would they? Right. So I always try to just honor that. But I think on a podcast that's harder, right? Because your goal is to interview. So if someone's just like, yes, no, next question,
Yeah.
people will start to be like, was that AI? I can't tell.
Yeah, yeah, it can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah,
So my
sure.
next question is what have you learned in doing this kind of work, but in your like in the work that you do as a therapist, but also with the podcast?
I am always learning in this work, and I think that's why I love it and am in it for such a long period of time. I think there have been periods where I feel like a sense of plateau in like professional development, and that's actually the hardest for me. If I feel like I'm learning, I feel like there's energy. And so in the podcast, I mean, just interviewing people who have such depth and rich experience is really refreshing for me. It's also nice to, as a podcast host, not be a therapist. I mean, you can't turn it off in some ways, but you're not like, I can talk, I could tell a story. I can just be like, oh, that makes me think of this, right? Instead of like therapy is definitely different. So it's nice for me to have both and to be able to share myself in some ways and just have casual conversation that doesn't yes, it's a healing conversation, but it's not like it feels like a different container. So I really like learning from guests, asking them things I'm genuinely curious about. And I try to do the same in therapy. If I find myself wondering, this kind of feels like this feels similar to the person's relationship with their dad, or this feels similar to something they've been through, but I try to just trust my intuition and go with it. And that seems to work well in terms of keeping things feeling alive, right? And relevant in the moment and being able to be surprised even by what comes up or out, rather than
Mm,
like bringing an agenda so much. It's a little bit more like being open and trusting. And I find that in that approach, I feel like I learn more, right? I'm not the expert coming in telling people what to do, but more joining people with, lots of tools and experience and support in a sense of curiosity of like, well, what's going to work and what's going to help you move forward or access healing.
hmm Lastly, to kind of wrap this up, what have you, what's looking back, how does this what would you tell your younger self in terms of like where from where you were in the beginning to where you are today? Because you've gone through a lot of stuff in your life and all that kind of stuff. So, but what would you tell your younger self and sort of if you had to write like a letter, what would it say? Because I know I asked this question to another guest of mine and then she was like, "Are you trying to make me cry?" Like she,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, because that can be an emotional one, right? And I think it's important for all of us to think of that. What would we want our younger self to know? And what comes to mind, honestly, is just a sense of gentleness. Like, um, I'm 45 right now, and just reflecting on, the different decades of my life, it feels like I think people would probably describe me like as a compassionate person or a gentle person in that way, but and I've learned mostly through loss to not be stressed about the small stuff, so to speak. But there's something really beautiful with age, if you will, 45, that like a gentleness to myself that feels so, so good. So good. And I even noticed it recently in the podcast where earlier on, I was so much more perfectionistic. You're going to laugh, Laszlo. You're going to laugh. My first episode, you know how background noise can be distracting? I
Yes, yes.
unplugged my refrigerator in the other room for my first episode. I'm not even kidding. Unplugged the refrigerator. and now and now, like, there are moments there it's not super polished, or maybe the audio is not perfect, or something's different from one episode to the other. And I'm like, that's fine. It's totally okay. So there, that shows up in that way on the podcast. But I also feel like with myself and having a daughter now, that there's just a little more of softness or gentleness or ease or letting go or compassion for myself as a human, less like I've got to do these things, right? Like even in a day, if I don't get my workout in, like I want it and it's good for me, but if it just didn't happen because other stuff was more important, I'm like, it's okay. I'm still going to go to bed at 10,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm just going to be like, that's how the chips fell today. And be more aware of the goodness in myself and others. I think we come to this world really like raw and open. And then most of us in some form or another experience harm or neglect or, trauma. And then we have protection and defenses built around that, that protect us from being harmed, but also protect us from sometimes that sense of ease or softness or connection. And so, yeah, there's a sense of gentleness that's come that I would want to impart to my younger self.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Okie dokie.